this edition of Valor Media. This is episode number 40 for November 9th, 2020, and I'm your host, Mark Appenzeller. I don't know about you, but I think I'm beginning to discover more and more in me that I get hung up about time. I think particularly this year with just all of the chaos and all of the challenges and all of the problems, in the weird world of 2020, time began to weigh heavily because we felt like everything just kind of was moving at a glacial pace. It seemed like the brakes were being slammed on right and left. And I think in the middle of all of that, I began to recognize things about myself, and I began to understand that I have a lot of hang-ups about time because I'm a busy person. I think I'm a pretty focused person. I like to press in and have goals and specifically move toward making things happen. And so when they don't happen, I start asking a lot of questions. And I don't think that's unique to me. It's something that we all go through at different times. We do it in different degrees. It may impact each one of us individually, but I think that's a common thing. It's this idea of dealing with this linear world. We are linear creatures, but we were created by a God who exists outside of time. Time is a created thing, but we're plopped right down in the middle of it. And so we live in this world where there's a past, a present, and a future, and we're moving along this timeline. And 2 weeks from next Thursday is out there, but we don't see it yet. And God does, because outside of time, He's seeing the beginning and the middle and the end. It's one big thing. Jesus said that He was the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And I think that eternal nature of God is so fascinating. And in this particular world that we're in right now, in this moment, we don't have that free-ranging perspective because we're in that linear world. There are plenty of times that I'll say, by now, this should have happened. By now, that should have happened. I'm 55, and I've wasted a lot of time lamenting certain things that just never happened. I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I had very specific goals of certain things that I wanted to accomplish and achieve by the time I was 30, and a lot of those goals were musical. I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter. I've been working in home recording and in writing music and working with other musicians for decades, and that was really what I wanted to do with my life, and I had a lot of great opportunities over the years. I was able to work with some wonderful people. I did a lot of different projects, but I never really felt like I got there. And what drove me crazy was that I felt like there was something that burned like a coal in my heart. And I couldn't figure it out because it never really came to fruition and it never went away. Now, I believe that when the Lord creates each one of us, He really does deposit unique and specific things that make us who we are. There are mark things that you may have a similarity with, but they're not yours because they're mark things. I really do believe that there's this incredible, unique, literally one and only one aspect to how we are created. And the Lord said that He would give us the desires of our heart. And I don't think that means if we want $1 million, we'll get it. I think it means that He puts things in our heart, plants things deep in the fabric of who we are. And if we walk in relationship with Jesus Christ, as we're conformed to the image of Christ, as we renew our mind with the washing of the water of God's Word, we'll begin to see those things. We'll begin to embrace them in ways that we never could have before. Today, I want this to be hopefully an encouragement to you. Because for me, I've gone through a long span of time where I think some of these old goals, these old dreams, these old desires of my heart that didn't come to pass were starting to weigh on me like a ton of concrete blocks. It felt like a carrot on a string. I felt like I never got any closer. And particularly this year, my life has gotten busier and busier and busier, I feel like I'm spread so thin. I have so many time commitments every single day that there aren't enough seconds left over at the end of the day to put any time toward pursuing goals associated with those things that I really feel are all about that purpose that burns deep within me. And much of it is musical. Now, one of the things I love the most about music is sharing it with my wife, Allie. We've been worship leaders together. We write music together. We sing and play instruments together. And I have always wanted to record together. And we have started to do that. And over the years, there have been a couple of original compositions that I've gotten the backing instruments pretty much down, and we've done some work on the vocals, but it just never gets there. And I have wanted more than anything to record an album of originals with my wife. We have made a start. And it just seems like every single time that we decide, you know what, now we're going to do this, something happens. There's always some disconnect between her schedule and mine. When I'm ready, she's not. When she's ready, I'm not. We're never aligned. And it's nobody's fault, but it just is so frustrating. This year, I really felt like, we need to do this. We can't keep waiting. And I thought, if I'm just a little bit more purposeful, if I just push in a little bit harder, I'll make it happen. And guess what? It didn't work. And so here we are. And on November 9th, 2020, those half-finished recordings for the album that I still hope we do someday record are still sitting there. That, to me, at different times, has been crushing. And I went through some periods this year of being incredibly depressed that we just never seemed to make headway toward that goal. But what I wanted to share with you is the fact that the Lord has begun to do something in me that really reshaped where I put my focus. I could have just continued to lament the fact that Allie and I never finish our album, but I'm actually now in kind of the home stretch of recording an album by myself, an instrumental album, praise music that I wrote and played all the instruments. It wasn't what I was originally picturing, but it's actually been a really cool experience. And I've had a million little bits and pieces of musical ideas over the years that I was never quite sure what to do with. And in this project, all these little random odds and ends have kind of been streaming back into my realization. And they're coming together now in a way that they never would have before. And I'm very pleased with the progress that I'm making. I'm just about done recording, and then I need to get into the mixing and the mastering stage. And my goal is definitely by Christmas 2020, I want to release the album. I want to get it on Spotify and Apple iTunes and just get it out there. That's a huge goal for me. Now, I've done some album projects in the past, but I've really, in these last several years, just been so dying to do an album. And I believed it had to be with Allie. And I don't know why that didn't work out, because I love to do music with her, and that's kind of my dream project. And I'm not giving up on it, but I'm recognizing that no matter how depressed I got, no matter how much I wanted it to happen, I couldn't will it into being, because God had me in a different season. And instead of just sitting around and saying, well, you know what, I just want to give up, I instead decided, okay, well, I need to do something, because that coal in me that burns, that glows, it never really turns into an inferno. It's never a raging fire where I see, oh yes, now I'm able to achieve and accomplish and produce. But it also never goes out. What is that all about? And over a period of several months, without even really consciously being aware of it, I feel like the Lord redirected me, got my focus off of the lamenting, and really put me into a place where I started looking at the fact that that album with Allie, this isn't the season, but that there is a season here to do something that may not be what I was originally intending, and yet it's very much in the moment and where God wants me to be. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today, is this whole idea of embracing your season. I don't know what you have going on in your life, and I don't know if you have unrequited, unfulfilled dreams and plans and goals and ambitions. And it can be painful, especially when you invest energy and work and when you wait, and sometimes when you wait a long time and nothing happens. I want to encourage you to seek the Lord and find what it is that He's trying to tell you. Because God does not tease us. It's not a carrot on a string. He's not doing things for the sake of making you miserable. He's doing things because He wants to lead and guide and direct you into His perfect purpose and will. And that may mean that something that you were so sure you were supposed to do isn't happening just yet. I heard somebody a while back say that, and I just thought it was so brilliant. They were talking about when you pray and ask the Lord for something, there are really only three possible responses. It's either yes, no, or not yet. Maybe you're in a not yet season. So instead of just waiting for whatever it is you're hoping will materialize, I encourage you to find out, well, Lord, what do you want me to do in this season? What can I embrace in this season? I find it really fascinating in Genesis chapter 1 as you read the story of creation and you're looking at the Lord as He's speaking forth His word and calling all these things into existence. And He says, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night and to let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years." What I find really fascinating about that is that God created seasons before He created us. And that tells me that seasons are incredibly important to the Lord because they were something that He needed to have in place before we came along. It's just like the earth itself. He didn't create Adam and Eve and just let them float around out in the cosmos. It was important that the earth be established, that the foundations be laid for man. I believe that's the same deal with seasons. I think seasons in God's perspective are a lot more than just time. I think it is a spiritual precept. I think God really does have a specific time for a specific purpose. We're all familiar with Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The Byrds wrote a really cool song derived from that called Turn, Turn, Turn. To everything there is a season. There is a time for everything, a season for every action that is under the heavens. We don't always know what that season is. And in our human striving, sometimes we're reaching so hard and we're hoping something will happen. And yet, if we just relax, if we just trust the Lord, if we just put everything in His hands, He'll show us, because sometimes there's something else unfolding that we weren't even aware of. And so instead of just being disappointed, let's look to see, what are you doing in this season, Lord? You know, one of my favorite movies of all time is Chariots of Fire. It's a fantastic film. It's based on true events, primarily centered around two different British runners in the 1920s. One, Harold Abrahams, was a Jewish college student at Cambridge University, and the other, Eric Liddell, was a Scottish missionary. Now, these two guys were incredible runners, but they ran for very different, deeply personal reasons that were unique to both. Harold Abrahams faced anti-Semitism in his world, and it was very impactful on him, and it was important to him to run as a form of validation. He wanted to prove his merit, his value, his worth. He wanted to become the fastest man in the world. He was focused. He was relentless. He trained and pushed himself ruthlessly in pursuit of that goal. Now, Eric Liddell believed that for him, running was an opportunity to share Christ. He felt that if he could run well and attract the attention of people, he could use that as a platform for preaching the gospel. So each one of these guys had his own unique take on why he was running. There was a race once where the two actually ended up competing against each other. It was a 100-meter dash. And in that particular race, Eric Liddell actually won. He edged out Harold Abrahams. Well, after that race, there was speculation that at some point, these two rivals would probably race in another 100-meter dash, competing against each other again. and people were probably wondering if this time Harold Abrahams could be victorious. Well, both men ended up being selected as members of the British Olympic team, and they were scheduled to go to Paris for the 1924 Olympics. But prior to leaving for Paris, Eric Liddell discovered that the 100-meter dash would be something he simply would not be participating in, because the qualifying heat, which was kind of like a preliminary run that determined whether or not you would be in the final, was scheduled for a Sunday. Now, from Eric's perspective, he needed to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, and he felt that if he ran, even in a qualifying heat, he was putting attention on himself rather than God, and so he decided to not participate. Well, that meant Abrahams and Liddell would not compete against each other in the 100-meter dash. Harold Abrahams ran in that race, and it was an incredible event. He actually wound up winning the race. He became the very first British runner to win a gold medal, and he set a new world record with his time. He became the fastest man in the world. But Liddell wasn't there. Now, Eric Liddell had no doubts about the decision that he made. He was committed. He was purposeful. He knew that he was honoring God by what he decided to do. He could have lamented the fact that he did not get to race against Abrahams. But by making that decision, God opened up something else for him. Eric Liddell actually ran in several other races in that Olympics, and in the 400 meters, he ended up winning the gold medal and setting a new world record. Now you can speculate. If these two guys had raced against each other in the 100-meter dash, would Abrahams have won? Would Liddell have won? It's a moot point because, as it stands, they did not race together, and they each managed to accomplish what they had set out to do. Harold Abrahams became the fastest man in the world in that prestigious dash. He validated himself from his own perspective. And Eric Liddell ran in a race that he won, and it was devoid of that competition. It wasn't about Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams who will win. It was about Eric Liddell being his own personal best, doing what he could, and glorifying God in the process. Not at all what people would have originally expected, and yet somehow it worked out so perfectly. And I believe it was because Liddell had that purposeful approach. He knew what he needed to stay true to. That can be hard for us to do sometimes. I encourage you, whatever you're facing at the end of 2020, if you have things that you thought should happen and they haven't happened, then look at the season you're in and ask the Lord to tell you, where do I go from here? If I don't get this right now, what is the next thing? God never wants us to stand still, and he definitely never wants us to quit. There is a deceiver, the father of lies, who came to steal, kill, and destroy, and he will whisper to us, and sometimes he'll shout in our ear and say, "See, I told you it would never happen." When he does that, instead of being crushed, we need to be resolute, and we need to say, you know what? What I thought was going to happen didn't, which means God has something different and probably better. Lord, what is it? I really do encourage you, wherever you are in your life and whatever you're pursuing, if you have something that burns like a coal in your heart, never goes out, never quite flares up, find out what the Lord wants you to do with that. And maybe this isn't the season, but there is something in this season. Trust him. He will bring all things to pass according to his perfect purpose, his perfect will, if you trust him and recognize that he loves you so much that he allows things to happen only in season. I hope this has been encouraging to you. And if there are topics that you would like us to share in these installments of Valor Media, I encourage you to share your ideas with us by reaching out to us at media@thevalorcenter.org. I also encourage you to learn more about the overall mission and vision of Valor Ministries by visiting us on Facebook at Valor Ministries and Valor XL, and at our websites, www.thevalorcenter.org and www.valorxl.com. If this podcast is an encouragement to you, I invite you to come back each week. Please follow this podcast. Listen to each new episode. They're published on Mondays. And I really do encourage you to let this be a catalyst for you to move forward and to really seek the abundant life that you have in Jesus Christ. And if you are blessed by this podcast, as we move through the end of 2020 into 2021, would you consider financially assisting us so that we can continue to bring you this kind of content? If so, your generous tax-deductible donation can be made securely online by going to www.thevalorcenter.org/donate, or you can send a check or money order to Valor Ministries, 324 East Antietam Street, Suite 104, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21740. Thank you again for joining me today. Please come back next week for another installment, and until then, remember this: you were made to thrive.